Renfield. So this is the new kind of horror action comedy starring Nicholas Hoult and Nicholas Cage. Nicholas Cage famously playing Dracula in this movie, but the movie is not about him. It is about Renfield, who is played by Nicholas Hoult. Renfield is a character from Bram Stoker's Dracula, who's he's Dracula's minion, his servant lackey, played famously by Tom Waits in the 1992 adaptation of that. Here we find him in modern Pittsburgh, where Renfield is kind of stuck in this relationship that he doesn't like. He has to serve Dracula's needs, has to kill people, bring in bodies to eat, and he's kind of joined this support group for people in toxic relationships, and he's trying to get out of it, but he doesn't really know how to. He feels really trapped, and at the same time, we meet Aquafina's character, police officer Rebecca Quincy, who's trying to take on organized crime in Philadelphia, which is it's a big subplot. She's trying to take down the Lobo crime family. At one point, they cross paths during a big shootout, and they kind of learn about each other's problems and help each other out. This movie's a lot of fun. It's big on the action of the action comedy, and of course, we get to see the great Nicolas Cage absolutely chewing scenery as Dracula, which is what the main reason we're all there for. So, Zach, what do you think?
Renfield is surprisingly fun for the size of it. It's a $65 million feature from director Chris McKay. And I can't remember the last time I feel like we saw just like a bombastic, mid budget, action comedy that's high concept with some good talent on screen. That's like surprisingly good. Like I it's not going to break any records. It's not getting nominated for any Academy Awards or anything. But Renfield's pretty fun. Like it's just a decent, good time at the movies. And like I feel like I can say that effectively because it never claimed to be anything bigger. First off, it's an R-rated action comedy, right? And they lean hard on the R rating. I think the second line in the script features the F-bomb. Like it opens right opening scene, people are dropping F-bombs, right? And it goes all throughout the whole feature. Big blood, big gore, big violence, big acting from Nick Cage, who I didn't know. This is fun fact. This is Nicolas Cage's first supporting actor role since 2013, when he played supporting actor in Kick-Ass. He's been
Wow.
he's been lead every other time. It's been a decade. my man will not get in the background, but he's got an affinity for Dracula. Also, Superman. More Nick Cage trivia. Nick Cage wanted to play Superman, Dracula, and Captain Nemo from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea at some point in his life. And he was going to be Superman for Tim Burton, but now he's too old and says he won't do it. This is Dracula. Somebody get on that 20,000 Leagues remake. Nick Cage at the front. It's a good movie. Anyway, Renfield is fun, like for what it is. Like I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. It's got some decent laughs with a pretty hot script coming from Chris McKay, coming off the heels of Lego Batman. And I don't know, man. It's not a bad time. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's a fun time. Real quick fun fact: Nicholas Cage owns a copy of Superman #1, the famous like 1937, like the first appearance of Superman. Nicholas Cage owns one of those. It's worth like $2 million.
It's amazing.
Anyways, no, this movie's a lot of fun, and it's one of those things. Like it has a ridiculous premise and a ridiculous trailer, and it reminds me of last year's The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, the other Nick Cage movie that was very meta, where he played himself. That
Yeah.
movie ended up being a very big disappointment and didn't really deliver on its premise. And Renfield is kind of the opposite of that, where it really does. It is over the top, it is ridiculous, but it also has a lot of heart, because you have this kind of more grounded plot of him trying to. It's almost like a friend breakup. Like it's him trying to get away from this really terrible situation he's in, this bad relationship, and he kind of gets manipulated and gaslit and all these things into still serving Dracula. But we see him get some support. He moves out, he gets an apartment, he dresses like he shops at Old Navy. There were a bunch of Old Navy gags they cut from the from the script.
Surprising amount of Old Navy gags. Yeah.
Um but it's a lot of fun. There's a little bit too much going on plot wise. Like I said, there's this whole subplot about taking on this crime family, which I think is a little bit too heavy. But it's just fun enough. Like there's so much action, and it looks like they're probably going to lose a lot of money in this movie, but they really put a lot of money in the action. Like there's so many action scenes, and there's like car chases, and things like that, and it's really over the top. And it was a fun time, even if it may not be financially successful.
I think one of the things that's most surprising about this movie is like the practicality of a lot of the action and set pieces. The production design in this movie is surprisingly good. At first,
Yeah,
it's not that noticeable. You're like, they put Nick Cage and Nicholas Hoult in old footage from like old black and white Dracula serials. They like place them in there and make it look like, you know, there's this Dracula of yore. Chris McKay actually said that he wanted this to be a direct sequel to basically Dracula, which is silly, obviously, but I think that draws inspiration in the film, makes for a couple of good gags. And then you get like a flash forward to now, right? Like modern day New Orleans, I think is where they're at, where you've got a gangster's hideout in this like big fancy mansion penthouse thing. You've got like Nicholas Holt's apartment, which is like, it looks like the inside of the Cat in the Hat's house, like the Mike Myers movie. Like every wall is painted like bright orange or green or teal. You've got Dracula's hideout, which is in like this old abandoned hospital with this like really sick like blood bag throne thing they've got built, which is really cool,
really
like
impressive.
crumbling stuff, all kinds of stuff. And I was impressed at how practical a lot of the stunts are. Like in the opening action sequence, Dracula is just pounding on some vampire hunters, and one of them gets Dracula whips one. Hold on, let me get my thoughts. One of them whips open the curtains at one point. Dracula bursts into flames and leaps at this guy and starts like pounding on him, right? Like he sits on his chest and starts beating him up. And it's literally a stuntman in a fire suit beating on another stuntman, like in fireproof clothes. It's insane. Like I can't remember the last time I saw a literal man on fire in a movie. Well, Ant-Man could never. There's a scene when he possesses a priest and then explodes him, and it's like a brilliant body explosion. Ben Schwartz's character, this kind of like this kind of gangster crony who's perfect for. He's got this big fancy Dodge Charger with this stupid decal on the side. And one point he drives it like over a curb through like 4 trash cans and like past a light pole. And it's like, it's a literal car. And I'm like, it's just nice to see that again, because I feel like so many studios will just shoot on green screen and we'll do it in post. And like it was actually really nice to see like just practical effects, people on wires in action sequences. Admittedly, the blood is pretty bad CGI. Like I think they maybe gotta tighten that up because it looks pretty clunky in the movie, but it's fast and you don't really think about it, right? Like, and ultimately it's supposed to be a comedy, and I think that stuff comes off as more tongue in cheek than inauthentic.
Yeah, like I said, it really, the action stuff really works, and there was just a lot more of it than I thought. I thought it would lean more into like the drama of it, but there's tons of action. There's also a ton of comedy. Like there are a ton of jokes, and they work and they land more often than they don't, because there's nothing worse than going into a comedy and where it's just crickets in the theater. But
Yeah.
it's a good laugh, kind of all the way through. I want to talk about our cast here, because we have some other standouts from our leads. We also have Ben Schwartz as, I didn't realize this was his name, Tedward Lobo. Tedward.
His name's
Um,
Tedward. Oh, that's great.
yeah. The great Shohreh Aghdashloo as the kind of matriarch of this crime family, Bella Francesca Lobo. She was actually like, she was nominated for an Oscar for Best Actress a while ago, so it's funny
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
see her in this. And then just a lot of supporting characters, but you know, they play like the big bad mafia family really well, and that's just a fun counterpoint. Again, it's heavier on the plot than it should be for I mean, it's basically a 90-minute movie. um as well, so it's kind of taken on a little bit too much to wrap up too tightly, but it's so much fun. Like there's laugh, and when you're not laughing, there's action, and there's a sweet kind of will they won't they romance between Nicholas Hoult and Aquafina's characters, and it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's funny that first trailer that came out for this made it like seem much smaller, And I was really pleased that like there's a bit more going on in this movie than meets the eye. Like that first trailer makes it look like Nicholas Hoult rages out when a bunch of dudes storm a bar and he kills a bunch of them, and then Aquafina is like, "Oh, you that was crazy." And the next morning they're in their apartment and they're wearing different clothes, and you're like, "Oh, guys, they're getting together, and then we got to go take on Dracula," and that's the movie. And like, no, there's actually a bit more to it than that. I was surprised at this through line of like genuine yeah, adults with like codependency issues. It seems silly, but like these therapy sessions that like Holt is going to try to get his character Renfield over this like dependency he has on Dracula, this monster. All the other people at the meeting, of course, don't really know that he's talking about the Prince of Darkness. They just assume he's talking about his boss, who's a narcissist. But like, I was surprised at like how much I think actual like thought was going into the script behind that stuff. There's a great sequence where he like confronts Nicolas Cage, who laughs it off, of course, because he's freaking Dracula. But he's like, hey, like I'm a person and like I have thoughts and like I mean something. And I was like, oh man, like they're son of a gun. There's just a little bit of heart behind this
Yeah,
script. Like
it gets a little serious.
that's actually really
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, and meanwhile, like Cage is doing it so big, which is great. He did some interview somewhere where he said they shot a few scenes to this movie, and Chris McKay was like, "Hey, could you go bigger?" And he was like, "Oh, you want the full Cage? Okay, yeah." And he brings the full Cage, which is a delight. Like if there's no better way to have Cage as a supporting actor than him going just 110% like in the right direction, right? And like they managed to get him there perfect. Also Ben Schwartz, like surprisingly funny, and Ben Schwartz is already funny. I feel like the man doesn't get enough work as it is. Like great pick is kind of this cowardly gangster who's trying to be tough, like covered in tattoos. He's got the high pitched voice. He sounds like Sonic the Hedgehog. Great. If anybody, like I think Nicholas Hoult was the most tamped down, only because
Yeah.
he's supposed to be this guy who's like really struggling and like is really has no self confidence and can't talk to anybody about his problems. Like so that was actually kind of nice, I think, in his own way. I didn't mind his portrayal of Renfield.
Yeah, you're right. He is kind of the most kind of watered down character, but at the same time, and we left this out. He kind of has these superpowers he gets from eating bugs. So you'll see me eating bug, and that's kind of the first big action sequence. He fights a bunch of gangsters that they're about to shoot Aquafina's character. He eats a bug, and he has super strength, and he can like throw people across the room, and there's tons of gore with it too. So even though his character is a little bit tamped down, he gets to do a lot of the real fun stuff.
Yeah. I think overall, like Renfield is charming because it's so simple, but it feels so tangible. Like they just shot a lot of things practical. Like they just built the sets, they got the costumes. Nick Cage has these like horrifically uncomfortable looking sharp teeth in his mouth the whole movie. Like big
Yeah, the
smiles. If you're
prosthetic.
watching this on Facebook Live, I got it up on screen right now. Like yeah, like I think that stuff just helps it feel like a bit more real. And like if it's gonna be a comedy, which it is, and it does the comedy pretty well, and it's gonna be an R-rated feature, like I think it's important you give your audience that subtext. The whole reason Snakes on a Plane worked isn't because Samuel L. Jackson looks at the camera and says, "This is ridiculous, right? Snakes on a plane." It's because they play it straight and they respect their audience enough to be able to read that and see that of course it's ridiculous. Snakes on a plane. And Renfield, I think, kind of approaches it from the same angle. Like every adult watching this movie knows that it's not some big blockbuster joint. Like it's not some huge studio putting it out. Like it's just a fun little script starring Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Hoult for 90 minutes being vampire people. And like, I don't know. I think it's kind of rad. I can't fault it.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was a real fun time. Laugh through most of it. More jokes land than don't, and yeah, it's a fun time at the movies.
Yeah, it sure is. Andy, would you recommend Renfield?
I would, like I said, it's a lot of fun. It's short. It's only 90 minutes. Good. You get to see Nick Cage really chewing screen. It's funny because you can see him like actually lose character and just turn into full blast Nick Cage for part of it. There's a lot of jokes. Aquafina is funny as well. Good action. If you're a little unsure, I would say save it for streaming if you're not a huge fan of this. But yeah, I saw Nick Cage in the makeup, and I was like, I gotta see that.
Yeah. How could you not? Yeah, I don't know what streaming service it'll be coming to. It'll be there soon though, or VOD, because like Andy said, unfortunately, it's not doing that stellar at the box office. It is a bit of a reflection on like what people are willing to spend money on, right? If you're going to go to the theater and blow $50 on tickets and popcorn, you want it to be something that's like big and bold. And like a quick 90-minute romp may not be that thing, but for people who go see movies a lot, especially like Andy and I, you could do worse, man. Like Renfield ain't bad. I have a hard time faulting this movie. This would be a good the drama bits are a little slow in the second act, but like it feels like something you could put on like a Halloween party on mute, right?
Yeah.
Like people will kind of watch it, but it's never going to draw too much attention. Like it's a solid little feature. Like I think Renfield's pretty fun. You could certainly do worse, and that's Renfield. Well, now we